Hello. Chris here with another episode of the Make It podcast. And this is an Indie Talk week. And I have special guests with me today. The one and only Charity Wakefield and her partner in crime, Maggie Contreras, known for the documentary Maestra. And I'm just so glad to have you guys here, you ladies here with me today to talk about this and obviously the world of film in general. So welcome to Indie Talk, ladies.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Anytime. I do want both of you to sort of give this audience a deeper sense of who you are. But before you do that, can you just tell everybody where you are, like physically located right now?
Okay, I'll start. You go. Go ahead.
I should have said Charity first, Maggie second. Wait, which one of you normally goes first in these situations?
I would say Maggie should go first. She's the director. I'm the producer. Maggie should go first, even though I did try.
That's fascinating, by the way. We'll get back into that in a little bit. All right, Maggie, go ahead.
I am just waking up in Los Angeles, California.
Good. Thank you. And Charity?
I'm just coming to the end of my day, kind of. My end of my working day in London, England. And it's just stopped raining. You didn't ask for the weather, but I'm going to give you it.
Oh, that's totally fine.
Not here. So you can see Charity and I are at polar opposite ends of our environments.
When is the last time it rained in LA, Maggie?
We had a beautifully wet summer, and now it's making up for it by just being an oven.
Yeah, it's an oven here. I am in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, and it's been hovering around the 100-degree mark for the last couple of weeks. And what we have here that you guys might not enjoy is humidity. And the humidity is like you walk outside and you're already like covered in sweat. Now, the good news is you don't need to invest in sauna. You don't need to invest in steam rooms. You have one. You have a natural steam room. Just go sit on your porch.
How do you handle traveling around outside? Because I did a film in Cuba once, and I remember we had this lovely hotel that we stayed in Havana, and it was just the other side down this amazing, I can't remember the name of it. I want to call it Las Ramblas, but I think that's in Barcelona. There's like a promenade at the edge of the beach, and it looked like we could walk into the old town within 20 minutes. And it was so incredibly humid. Like the heat I can take. I have family in Spain. I've been to Spain a lot. Spent a lot of time in the heat, but the humidity, I just couldn't do it. I was really like kind of embarrassed with my situation. I was like, I'll be walking to set, I'll be walking into town, I'll be doing all this stuff. And I stepped outside and within 5 minutes, I was like, I actually just can't handle it. It was terrible.
Yeah. So, well, how do we handle travel? You know, the thing about Nashville is that it's doesn't have public transportation. Not really. I mean, there's a train that nobody rides.
I mean, like your legs, though.
Yeah. But yeah, we do it. We do it. We walk and get on the bike. That's what I'm saying. You can be very fit in Nashville, especially in the summer.
Oh, that's
you can, because you just drop the excess BS because you're outside and it's going to come off of you for sure. We interviewed producer Elise. Tell me this young lady's name. I don't know why I'm forgetting her name. I'm having a brain fart, but we interviewed a young lady who films almost exclusively in Cuba. And she was saying that the electricity kept going off, like electricity security is a thing when you're shooting there. And then also the film credit, is that still like, will they still pay like for 100% of your film if you hire all Cuban crew?
So I wasn't producing on that one. I was an actor in it. But yeah, we worked with the National Film Company of Cuba called ICAIAC, and you have to co-produce with them. Well, you certainly did at the time that we did our film. And we hired Cuban nationals throughout. So that was an amazing experience for us, going and working with a part Cuban, part, in fact, Scottish, part Mexican, part English team. And yeah, everything is run by the government, absolutely everything. And there are kind of their history of film is unbelievable. Like, this is probably a whole nother show, but because of the fact that Cuba was so set apart from the rest of our kind of, you know, let's say, certainly in England, we've had a huge amount of American film influence. And, you know, we've given some films to you, not quite as many. But in Cuba, they have entirely their own kind of history of film, and their films are completely independent of anything else and any other influence until really quite recently. So, and they're very proud of that. So it was amazing to work with them. But yeah, in terms of the technicalities, like we had all of our costumes on one costume, kind of like if you can imagine like a 1970s brown VW camper van extended is my memory of it. And it all had to stay on that one bus and have a guard outside it. And we, like things like even like, facilities were, Cuba is incredible in so many ways. And this is not a long enough kind of conversation, and we're not going to be talking directly about Cuba all this time. And I'd love to do it.
You can go as long as you want to, but I think you're right about that. It's a mixed bag for me. Like, right?
My experience of working there was just that the creativity. You're talking like out of the like incredible. Like there's so much creative going on in Cuba, and in terms of like a general level of financial support. That's a different story. And in terms of what we're kind of used to in our industries, the kind of level of access to everything, really. It wasn't easy to film there at all.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the mixed bag. I think it has this amazing charm because you do have Old Town. You do have like these cars that are from the 1950s and 60s. Because I don't know if people realize like they literally don't get imports.
No, they haven't for many years. Things are really changing now in the last 5 years or so. I can't speak to what it is now, but my experience of going there, it was about 10 years ago or so, was that it was a very make do and mend culture, which is beautiful and very nostalgic to look at. There's the kind of the facades along that kind of beach view that I mentioned they're painted beautiful colors. And they're kind of slightly wearing away, and that's stunning. And that's why so many people go there to shoot either adverts or music videos or film. Like it looks absolutely incredible. But when you stay there, you do feel a bit like, there's also a level of there isn't enough, financial support to be able to upkeep things to a higher standard, which is a whole political discussion that it would be too deep for me to get into. But the history there, the culture there, the kind of the food, the dancing, the music, it's just unbelievable. And I love doing our film.
Yeah. What's the name of that movie?
Day of the Flowers. It was a film with Carlos Acosta, who's a Cuban ballet dancer not a ballet dancer, playing a dance teacher. And myself and Eva Berthis played two Scottish women. That's quite fun in Cuba, doing a Glaswegian accent in the middle of Cuba with no dialect coach. So please don't judge the accent, but do judge the scenery because it's stunning. And that was one of my formative experiences, actually, kind of in terms of that was one of the points at which I really realized I would love to produce, because it was a really kind of comprehensive experience. Like all the cast and crew were staying in the same hotel, and it wasn't easy. There were lots of things that failed and changed. Like we had to, change locations. We lost some costumes one day because there was a problem on that costume bus I mentioned. Just lots of things went wrong, and there was a real sense of like a group sharing of those issues and problems, and it wasn't hierarchical in a way that other films can be. And I think some of that problem solving I'm really, really attracted to, which I feel like is essentially what producers do, is look at the maths. How can this be done? And to not panic and to say, how do I make sections of this huge, and fascinating provocation of how can this film be made, and concentrate and then start to kind of delegate and all that kind of thing. And you have to be somebody that's excited about problem solving. And I know that, I don't know, Maggie's done far more producing than me, I must say. Maggie, you might want to take this now.
It is. You have to love to problem solve. When presented a problem, it has to make you excited to want to solve it.
Yeah, I think that's true.
My hope, this is totally going with the Cuban tangent, which I'll be short, but I'm trying, charity would be my first call. I'm trying to get back there with a documentary about Cuban punk rockers back in when AIDS hit the island.
Wow.
Oh man,
Spread very, very fast. And there was these misfits who, lots of things are still illegal there. Listening to punk rock music and spiking your hair and ripping your clothes could land you in jail. And these people were coming from mainly the barrios, where you didn't have color TV and you'd get arrested for your music and you were probably hungry. But what Cuba had then and still has is a really, really great public health system. So when AIDS came to the island, they acted really fast. They went door to door. They tested your blood, and if you're positive, it's like, right, there's this facility. You're all going to go there. We're not too sure what this thing is, but you're all going to live there. And when you got there, you got 3 meals a day. You got color TV. You could listen to whatever music you wanted. And one of the leaders of this, they were called Los Frikis, the freaks, Los Frikis. Their leader, Papo, he ended up in the facility. And when his friends came to visit him, they're like, dude, this is better than what we're doing. And you're listening to the music. This is great. Give me some of your blood. You have hundreds of young people who injected themselves with the HIV virus on purpose, so they could all live in community together. It's an incredible story.
Oh, I have to see that. You have to make that.
Yeah, we got to make that. We got to make that. It's a toughie though, because you do have to, as charity experience, like you do, well, as Americans, like we can't just go and do that. We would have to hire other production companies to help.
But is it true that you get that they'll still pay 100% of the movie if you do that?
I sincerely doubt that they would do that for a documentary that is putting a lens on their history.
Okay,
I think
got it.
more about tiptoeing, likely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's true too about what you're saying about producers. I don't know like what your family situations are like, but I have 3 kids, and kids are not fans of the producer's mind. Like they want to vent to you. They don't want you to solve their problem. And I had to learn that over time. I also have 2 daughters. So it's like, okay, I'll solve this problem for you. No problem. And they're like, I don't want you to solve the problem for me. I just want you to listen. I just want you to stop. Right. And I'm like, oh, but I really want to solve this problem for you because I can do it. I have the answers. And it's like, nope. So it's kind of like this idea of like, you can never be an emperor in your own house. You can never be, I don't know if that's the right phraseology. Somebody have to look that up. It's close, but it is that sense of like, this job allows us to go out and solve problems, because in your own house, not everybody wants you to solve their problem for them. And that's a very human thing as well. But
actually that is to solve the problem is what you recognize. You already are doing that. If you're recognizing that they need to be listened to, venting kind of without anybody stopping them is kind of therapeutic for them. And you're actually you are doing that. And then after that, you can kind of get to the kind of problem solve thing, I reckon. I mean, I have a son, he's only 2.5 nearly. So he doesn't really, do such kind of, intellectual.
He's just,
yeah. But he definitely vents.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And I have to deal with it all. But I just find that it's brilliantly kind of normalizing, in the sense that you can get really kind of incredibly worried about the tiniest detail of working, whichever role I'm doing. And particularly with acting, I can go very in on myself. And because it's a job in which you're asked to prepare a performance with your own face and voice, and people are going to be critical of that, and you're going to be critical of that. So, you're really introverted, thinking about yourself all the time, and you can get, really wound up about it. And then you come home and you see your kid and you're like, this is just, not to undermine it, because obviously filmmaking and entertainment is incredibly important. We've particularly realized that over the pandemic. However, these individual moments can be let go of. And that's what I think having a kid or a relationship or close friendships, even being around other people, it just takes you out of yourself. And that's really important. And that is similarly to what you were just saying, a way of kind of solving a problem without actually solving the problem, because you just, anything in life that allows you to kind of just let go of the anxiety around a certain thing can really help you move on through decisions. It's hard in filmmaking. I don't know about you, Maggie, or you, Chris, how you feel about those points when, and in film where you're really trying to make a particular point work. And then there's a certain point we have to like just move through and accept that a different way is going to get to a similar place.
Well, you've just defined documentary filmmaking.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. And I want to get into that, but I am the tangent king, and we will just like literally just talk about Cuba for an hour if I'm not careful. So I do want to go back and just tell this audience. I mean, they already know I'm a big idiot. So I mispronounced your last name. Maggie, tell us, give us a little background on you and tell us how to really pronounce your name. And then Charity, you go after that.
You weren't that far off. You just missed an R. Background. So Charity and I met when I was spending a lot of time in London. I started off my storytelling in film as an actor, did classical stage training. That's sort of my background of storytelling. And that really does affect how I show up behind the camera with my subjects for documentaries, something we can get in later. So it is relevant. And that's how Charity and I met. And then, I'm originally from Arizona. My father's side came up from Mexico, settled in Arizona. My mom's side were mountain people of Virginia for generations. And I'm a product of both cultures, grew up in both cultures. Thus the last name, Contreras, unless you want to pronounce it really, really well, which is Contreras. And then I came to LA as an actor, and I did sort of random TV shows and commercials, and all the time I was wanting to use all of my skill sets. So I ended up working for one of the top publicists in documentary film. And what this publicist would do is she'd take a film from, usually it was always Sundance. One time we had a South by Southwest film, which actually is how I met my producing partner, a director who I produced for 7 years. And it was there that I met the documentary community. Never thought about producing, never thought about directing. And sort of lived in that space in the doc world. And one of our clients was like, hey, I think you should think about producing. I'm like, okay, sort of put that in the back of my head. And then an opportunity arose and I ended up stopping that job in the publicity world. And I went in-house in a production company called Berkeley, which is Neil Berkeley. He's a director. And I produced that company and him and those films of ours for 7 years. We did Gilbert, about Gilbert Gottfried, the comedian. And then we had about solar energy, Jonathan Scott's Power Trip, one of the Property Brothers. We were going around the country for about a year talking to different communities about rooftop solar and exploring, well, why do the big energy companies have such an issue with personal rooftop solar? The answer there should be pretty clear. It's about power, literally, power, and figuratively. And then right before the pandemic, I started to freelance, a very strange time to choose to start to freelance. So went out on my own. Did some random directing, producing gigs. And then Neil and I heard about the competition La Maestra, which the Paris Philharmonic puts on every 2 years for female orchestra conductors. And he's like, I think you should direct this one. Again, something I never thought about doing. it was just sort of placed in my path, and I said yes to it. And then I've known Charity for years, and yeah, the rest is history. That's what brings us to today.
I love that. And Charity, do you want to give a little background on your journey?
Yes, I was born.
You were born. You were.
Okay. So I'm from England. I went to drama school here at the Oxford School of Drama, which is a very small drama school and very good. And then was terrified coming to London because it was such a small place, and we did so much kind of, I think, good work at that place, but it wasn't really kind of in the public eye. And then I just remember that big move coming to London was kind of frightening, the idea that you would actually have to get a job, not just be working with people that you know really well. And also it was only acting. I didn't do any work on making theatre companies or filmmaking particularly. It was just solid acting. So the first part of my career was definitely focused on that. I wasn't successful at the beginning. I didn't get an agent straight away. I didn't get a job straight away, but I was really keen and genuinely interested in what other people were doing. And my drama school was very good about the fact that you're coming from a small place. Not everybody will know you. If you really care about what you're doing and you go out and you see other things, that will just naturally lead you to a kind of a collaboration with someone. It was the hope. And that's kind of what happened. I ended up doing really small theatre for hardly any money for quite a long time, quite a few years. And it kind of built and built and built. And then, you know, 1 year I kind of got a decent agent and was starting to kind of go for more TV stuff, which luckily I managed to land. And I did a few period dramas. I did Sense and Sensibility, Any Human Heart, Wolf Hall. I'm doing a show at the moment, which is called The Great. And I've been very, very lucky as an actor. And I've managed to kind of do the dream of doing theatre and film and TV. And I try to keep it varied because I enjoy the physicality and the different kind of technical challenges of all of them. And as I mentioned before, about 12 years ago, I started getting interested in much more interested in the mechanics of how things work. As an actor, you really are often the last person to know anything. You are often given a script that's not real when you audition, especially if you're auditioning for a massive thing. Sure. You sometimes might get the real script, but you won't really know probably what the director's intentions are or the filmmaker's intentions, you know, and that's fine. You're there to kind of do that particular job of acting. But I was kind of more interested than that. And so whenever I was on set, like my first really big job, Sense and Sensibility, I was in practically every day. And, you know, I got to know the crew really well, as you do. And you know, you're there, you might be wearing a kind of crazy costume or something, but you're like, I'm sitting down having a cup of tea and these people are moving all of these cables. Let me help you. And then you get a strict kind of absolutely don't do that. And it feels so weird. You're like, well, I've got arms, you know, I can help. Why? You know, it's not going to. And of course, you know, realize really it's practical. Don't get the costume dirty. You've got to be ready for when you film. So you can't be tired or messy or dirty or not in the right room. Obviously, stick to your job. But I just found it really interesting what everybody else was doing.
Well, also just the fact you might get hurt and the whole daggum completion bond is based on you not being hurt.
Exactly. You know, exactly. Focus on the long game. You know,
though. She always does want to.
So I can tell it too. I'm like I'm like envisioning her lifting a table with crew and Jules. My hands are playing in the background.
I got to experience it firsthand. We did a film festival together in Sheffield, and I swear, everywhere I looked, she was just over there handling something. Here's water. Here's this. Wait, where's the photographer? Like, boom, 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 boom. So with someone whose brain works at like, all right, I am looking for the problem to solve. Yes, I can imagine that being on a set with Charity is like, she wants to help every department. And she probably could have given the
Charity, what's your resting heart rate?
It's quite high. I don't really relax very often, I have to say. I do have that brain, but it can cause anxiety too, because you can't fix everything or do everything, as you were just saying earlier.
True.
But I love film festivals, particularly because when I was at drama school, I worked, and actually for many years after that, due to the not getting many jobs straight away, I worked in cinemas, and I worked both front of house and also eventually in a cinema company's kind of head office, literally just doing admin for them. So it's these kind of experiences that kind of get you into the headspace of, where how other people might be viewing your film. As Maggie's was kind of touched on earlier with this, the notion of kind of going to Cuba to film something that might be extremely difficult for Cuban people to want to hear, and yet very necessary. You've got to be thinking really far ahead. And I wonder, Maggie, if this might, if you might have some special skills here because of working in publicity really, really far ahead in the film process. You're aware right at that very early process how it might come over. What's the culture that the film's going to come out in 2 years' time? What's the culture going to be like? Is it going to be the right time for the film? And sometimes you have to say, it's just not. I'm just too far ahead. It's not the right time yet. And then, or am I the person that's making it the right time? Is it something that's going to change perceptions? In which case, probably Maggie's work, I would say, is a prime example of that. And Maestra is one of those that is exactly the right time. This is exactly the right time to be talking about female conductors and women taking leadership roles in the workplace, and talking about the culture and the history that has brought us to this position, whereby you suddenly realize, which you'll know from watching the film, Chris, that only under 3% of female conductors in high up leadership positions is the kind of current case. And our film, Maggie's film, is not only about that fact, it's joyfully about the behind the scenes of female conductors and what their lives are like, and this competition in Paris.
That's what I wanted to ask you ladies about, though, that very part. And by the way, speaking of Cuba, before I forget, it was Zaire Montes who we interviewed and who filmed in Cuba. And she is amazing. And she has a filmmaking partner, and they just literally pump out feature films that are fun. It's amazing, their process. So check out Zaire Montes. But I was curious about that because I did watch the documentary. I think it was wonderful. It was beautiful. Like I said, from a standpoint of me being a musician myself, one of the concepts that stood out to me was this idea of musicality, because I will learn how to play songs for people when I have dinner parties or when people come over, or just for my own enjoyment, that are in pop culture. And the first thing you do is you just learn the notes. You just play the notes. Like, what is it? What is it? But it's not a song yet. There's nothing. How can I explain it? There's nothing to it. You just played the chords. No one's going to feel anything. And then once you have those chords and melodies committed to memory, then you can add your own musicality in it. You can make it your own. You can change the dynamic. You can change the pacing, the speed. You can add notes that aren't there. You can take away notes that are there, are supposed to be there. And now it's become something. Now you've turned it into something. And I love that explanation in the documentary. I guess my question is, how did you guys get access to La Maestra? How were you able to film these women doing, this competition? Why did they let you guys in and have such sort of unfettered, unfiltered access?
Well, I'm handing over to Maggie because this is all Maggie. I came to the process later in the filmmaking. Maggie did all of it.
So access is everything for documentary filmmaking. If you don't have access, you don't have a film. So the first thing, when you find a topic, the first thing you have to do is figure out who the gatekeepers are. And in this case, it's a massive cultural institution that is the Paris Philharmonic. So one of the most lauded cultural institutions in the world was the gatekeeper for this. And they don't know who I am. I unfortunately don't speak French. It was important for me to hire people who did speak French and to hire French people. I learned that very quickly. And then it was a matter of them saying yes to the project, right? Yes to, okay, this is a competition and you're asking to have cameras there, our first responsibility is to the artists. We want to make sure you're not going to get in the way. So there was I think it was about 9 months of back and forth calls. The French aren't very quick at responding to things. There's always a lot of weekends are sacred. There's a lot of holidays, and it's just there's also a lot of layers, especially in a bureaucratic system like a cultural institution like that. A lot of people have to approve. Okay. So it was working through that. If anyone listening to this is thinking about producing anything in France and you're not French, get yourself a French lawyer immediately. An American lawyer will only make things harder for you. As soon as we got our French entertainment attorney, it went from like just very dry calls to how's the weather today? How are you doing? like, oh my gosh, I get it. I was supposed to get a French lawyer from day one. Understood 6 months later. And then it was a matter of, okay, there are 14 people who were chosen to participate in the competition. Now it's a matter of getting access to them. So I wrote a personal letter explaining what my intentions were, asking if they would be interested. All but one was yes, absolutely. Let's get on that Zoom pre-interview and let's meet. That 14th person eventually came around. And then it was a matter of meeting these people like we are talking right now over a computer screen and trying to get a sense of them as a person, sense of them, of their story. And then in regards to, well, how did you choose who to follow? We were working with a limited palette, which oftentimes in any creative endeavor you are. There's a bunch of different elements to making anything that's creative. And sometimes having limited colors to work with is helpful. In this case, the pandemic was something that told us who we could and could not see. So some countries were closed. There was a woman in Hong Kong I was desperate to go and spend time with, but the country was closed because of the pandemic. We also had budget limitations. It's not like we had our full budget right up front. It was piecemeal. And every single time we got a little chunk, it was like, okay, who's available? Where can we go? And so we had to work with that limitation as well. So we had COVID, we had budget, and then we ended up with 7 people that I spent time with, and then 5 that you see on screen made the cut. Then there's that other element of access, which is how do you get someone who you've never met before to allow you inside their heart and soul.
Yeah. And have them open up and be so raw in front of you. Yeah.
And in that regards, I think it's interesting. I don't want to, I want Charity to be able to speak to this because I swear that having started as an actor and having that training of how to basically soften yourself so that you can be open to somebody else. Like if you're meeting someone, a blind date or whatever, and you want someone to be vulnerable, it's like you have to make yourself vulnerable. I'm a big believer in that. That might be controversial in talking to maybe some other documentary filmmakers because there is this element of sort of protecting each other as well, because we're talking about real life. It's not a script. But for me, especially if I have very limited time with someone, in some cases, I only had 5 days with some of these women. We didn't have an opportunity to build a long-term relationship.
You would never know that watching the documentary. So kudos.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's because you just have to be so present and so open to then invite someone else to also reciprocate that. So I feel like my actor skills, when people think of, oh, okay, well, that's a facade. No, it's actually about making yourself open and vulnerable and present. So that came into play.
And so you and Charity Charity, were you like instructing them not to look directly at the camera unless the setup was for them to look directly at the camera? Like,
I wasn't there during that. I wasn't there during that part of the process. But
I thought Maggie was saying that you helped in that regard.
no, I think Maggie was
she
saying
was talking about being an actor. Yeah,
but yeah, coming from
I'm saying yes.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. And when I've directed a short film documentary that I also produced, co-directed, and yes, exactly that. I think sometimes where it doesn't help is that I'm used to being in a kind of quite a sensitive, vulnerable state when I'm working, and I can sometimes be a little bit too conscious of how the subject is feeling. And I remember my producer at the time, Helen Bolter, on this film, I made a short film called Memento Vitae, which was about your relationship with your clothes. And I was interviewing an elderly lady who's a fantastic, bright, creative woman, and had loads. And, we were getting really wonderful material of her just being herself. And I remember Helen sort of saying, you've got to, she kind of said, you've got to be more brutal. I don't agree with being brutal, but I know what she meant in terms of we had a day, and she wasn't really very, we discussed that we would be talking about her relationship with her husband who had passed away, with the clothes that she had kept. And that was the purpose of the documentary, was to talk about the feelings that are held with material objects and why we keep them and why they're special and what they mean to us and what the memories are attached to the objects. And it would have been very easy to not actually go there and not ask the difficult questions, because I felt for her so much, and it took the producer at the time to say, you've got to ask, you've got to go further. And that, I think that as an actor, I think that can be harder, because you're not as detached, or it's a skill I have to learn, is to kind of be better at, not that I'm directing in this case, but yeah, in answer to Maggie, kind of.
Yeah, it's a really difficult balance, because I'm talking about like really wanting to connect on a really deep emotional level, but at the same time, you also have to think of the film and like the practical elements of it and what is good for the film. And so one of my producers who was on set with me occasionally, Neil, I'm kind of an overly empathetic person anyway. And I'm also a Libra. So it's like, everyone feeling okay? Everyone feeling okay? Everyone fine? And it's like, well, that's not my job. My job is also to the film and what the film needs. And if we're, running behind schedule, we have to think about that too. We've got crew. There's a lot to think about. Yes. So it's both of these things.
Talking about the very formative moments of getting to know your subject, that line of honest and clear communication about what the purpose of the film is, and also integrity in the work that you're making. And if you've communicated that correctly, you don't need to feel worried or upset if somebody becomes emotional, because you know that they understand fully why they're talking to you, and you can bring them back to that. You have a duty to bring them back to that. You don't want them to be saying things that they're uncomfortable with, but you do want them to be truthful in the moment about the subject matter that you've agreed to explore. So yeah, it's having those kind of two hats at the same time, isn't it? And it's so worth it. Moments in Maestra, I don't want to spoil anything, but there are some real kind of highs and lows. It's a competition, and you're dealing with women that absolutely feel like it's a make or break situation. They've put their lives on hold to go to a different country, or perhaps the country of your birth, as one of the women we follow is the case for them. She's from Paris, and but staying with them in those moments of difficulty is what makes the film.
Yeah, I really related to the competition part of it, and I'm a big softie anyway. But there was a moment in the documentary where the winner, the ultimate winner, which I won't give away, talked about what winning would mean, and why. And I caught myself almost starting to cry at that, because that's like been my whole life. Like it really spoke to, and I know I'm not a female conductor, but you don't have to be that to relate to what these women are going through and how much it means to them. And just unfairness is the wrong word, but just because all these women went on to do amazing things post competition, but the sense that this is it, like I could win or lose. The competition is so tight that I could win or lose based on what I'm wearing up there as I'm conducting. It could be that tight, and that could spiral my life or send my life into the stratosphere in my own mind. You know, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the women who are competing. In their mind, they're like, I'll win this and my life goes one way. I lose this for whatever reason and my life goes another way. And I was sort of fascinated by this idea of the role the orchestra itself played in the competition, because I've been on teams my entire life, both professionally and personally. And I just know that there is this subconscious performance bias that can happen where, for whatever reason, XYZ player or, what coworker, whatever, just works a little harder, plays a little harder for this particular leader. And you just start to wonder, okay, what happens if they find a conductor they really gel with and like? They can't help but play and be a little bit more perfect for that particular person. So there's a lot of layers to the film. I will say learning what you guys are talking about is very difficult. It takes a lot of time to sort of modulate yourself to fit the people you're talking to and trying to, get them to open up to you and make the film as good as it can be, looking out for the film. But one tool to speed up that process is a disc profile. Have you guys heard of the disc profile, or like sort of that disc self-assessment before? It's spelled DISC.
I don't think so. No.
I highly, highly recommend it. You end up with basically a 60-page book on who you are. And
wow.
And it's so accurate as long as you're honest. And I don't know why you wouldn't be. It's your dime. But you get this book back that tells you, here's your strengths, here's your communication style, here's the danger in your communication style, and here's some tools that you can use to modulate your communication style depending on who you're talking to. And so my life before I started Bonsai Creative, before being a producer, before our feature films and all that stuff that we did, I was in healthcare tech and education. And one of the things that I learned was to modulate myself based on the type of personality that the other individual had. And they basically fall into these different groups. Like there's a person who's a talker. And so if they're a talker, you have to change and be a listener. There's a person who is a doer. With a doer, you get out of their way and you let them feel like they're in charge because they're an A-type person that wants to be in charge. Then you have a person named a supporter. When you have a supporter, those are bridge makers. Those are people who link you with the people who make decisions and make things. Supporter actually can't do anything themselves, or they don't have the power, and they're too aggressive, or not aggressive, but just too passive and shy to actually do anything themselves. So you have to let them build you a bridge where you can walk across and find a way to communicate with them. So there are all these cool different ways that we as producers can learn to modulate ourselves to get what we want out of that cast or even the crew. So I highly recommend that if you need to speed up the process of learning that, because otherwise you just have to learn on set and, make 10 movies before you get it right.
I think it's really good. I'm speaking now as a 42-year-old, and I'm a very different person to who I was when I was in drama school. And in drama school, we did a lot of what you're talking about. So you do these exercises, and the first whole year of my drama school training was mostly about trying to work out who you are. Who are you? What do you do? What do you say? What do you like? What's your physical habit? How do you relate to people? How do you get what you want? And, you've your classmates watching you and analyzing you and telling you this stuff. And the idea is that you learn who you are so much that you're able to kind of let that go. And then you start looking at these characteristics in other people. But you have to be able to understand where you're coming from first. But what's funny talking to you now is that I realize I'm a different person now. So I've done all this work at drama school. But when do you actually check in on yourself and say, but how do I go through life now? Is it the same?
Yeah.
And I might be kind of going along under a certain understanding of what I'm like and what I'm doing and what I need to do, but it might be different now. So I think it's a good call to actually find a way to check in on yourself, really, for kind of any working environment, actually, and be like, what are my hang-ups? What are my triggers? You know?
Yeah. I think it'd be great. It's fun, and it's a lot more official than like the Enneagram or some of these other ones that are sort of pop culture tests. This is like official. It's like what corporations use.
Yeah.
And
cool.
I think you should check it out. Now, I know you're tight on time and you have to leave us pretty soon here, Charity. So this sucks. We have to have you back on for a round 2, which is we do that all the time. But before you go, can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media, on the internet, and maybe even see some of your work beyond this documentary?
You can find the film, Maggie, you say.
We can find the film. Right now we have an Instagram page. We're newly out of the gate, so we're still building our profiles, but our Instagram is at Maestra Movie, Maestra movie.
Beautiful. And then Charity, anything you want to share personally? Yeah.
You can find, I'm building a website actually.
Nice.
I want to bring all these different elements together. But I'm just on Instagram as me. So just Charity Wakefield on Instagram. Instagram's my main thing now. I find it the nicest kind of community.
It's
my time there.
It depends on like what you have to share the most, right? Like if you're sharing visuals, why wouldn't you be on Instagram? It makes perfect sense. So go follow her. It's going to be a fun and interesting follow. And Charity, we will have you back on very, very soon. You've been incredible. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. So nice to chat. This has been so lovely. Take care.
Likewise.
Bye.
Talk soon.
Thank you.
Peace. Papa Bear, why don't you come on? This is a nice segue and give us a thing we should know.
All right, Chris. I think you're going to be exempt from this one because it's a question that's more appropriate for Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
And but you're welcome to take a stab at it.
I will.
Okay. Who was the first woman to ever direct major orchestras?
Oh my God! Now we can't say the answer yet, Maggie. But you're right, Papa Bear. I would have not. I would guess. I would literally make up a name. It would just, and just see if it sounds like a German woman's name. It was Olga. It was Olga Schmidt. No, Olga Kleiner Schmidt. Yeah.
Well, it would be unfair to you unless it was brought up in the documentary. I haven't seen the documentary, and you have.
No, it wasn't.
I don't think it was. So Maggie might know this, but if she does, we will find out in a moment and move forward. But Papa Bear, thank you for dropping a thing we should know. And this is something I feel like I should know. I want to know this. I'm a curious mind.
I'm not sure it would be something you would. I mean, yeah. That's something I know.
What are you, Maggie, thinking about the strike, by the way? I wanted to just get your thoughts on how producers seem to be stuck in the middle. Like, so the thing we've gotten from the Guild, the Producers Guild, is, hey, we stand in solidarity with WGA and SAG, and that's true. But then we also are the middlemen and women, like the intermediaries between network studios and the cast and crew. And so, and I just feel like, the directors negotiated their deal. IATSE's not striking. And here we are with sort of a pseudo guild. And I don't think people bring us up very often in the process. What are your feelings?
Well, I am a member of SAG-AFTRA. I am not part of any other guild. I have a spouse who's an IATSE. So the one thing I will say is, so when I first came to LA and I was first starting this journey, it was months before the first massive strike. So it's a very interesting time to sort of look back at what our industry looked like then, what it looks like now. In the meantime, we have had the explosion of the streamers. And yes, these strikes are really important. I also want to make it clear that nonfiction, you would think it's assumed by many people when I talk about the strike that, oh, you're a nonfiction, it must be so great. Like now we need more nonfiction, right, to fill all of these. And unfortunately, that's what we all thought was going to happen. I thought this was going to be an incredible time to sell my film. 4 months ago, I thought, oh, okay, well, I don't want this strike to happen because friends, family, my own household is suffering from it. At the same time, the strikes are important, of course. I mean, in solidarity all the way. But I thought, oh, well, we're going to need more nonfiction. That's what I do. It's my bread and butter. I've got this incredible film that's ready for the market, and it's affecting everyone. Everyone is losing jobs. Everyone doesn't know what their budgets or mandates are. And at the moment, people are going to be listening back to this episode, so I don't know where we'll be when you do. But at the moment, Hollywood's on ice. It's totally on ice. Yep. And I need to make it very clear to everyone that at the moment, right now, in end of summer 2023, documentary filmmakers, nonfiction film, we don't have a union. We have very, very special needs as a community, and we do not have a union. So even though it's very, it's same skill sets, we're working for the most part as freelancers. We don't have pensions. We don't have safety nets. There is no union currently for nonfiction, for documentary filmmaking. And I feel like that is going to change because it has to change. But these are conversations that are just starting to happen right now. So it is important. Again, I am a member of SAG-AFTRA. Of course, it's important to be in solidarity with my peers, with the sort of larger family that is our industry. And at the same time, it's difficult to hold that space knowing that as a nonfiction, as a documentary filmmaker, I don't have any room for negotiation. There is no union. So it's a very, very strange time. I also have just this strange feeling that the networks know how long they can hold out. There's this feeling of an element of starving people out. There is, crazy. I think it's pretty a well-known fact that a lot of this is a tax write-off. And up to a certain point, it's a tax write-off. After that, it's damaging. So I don't know what that point is. But to me, that feels like a starve-out point. It's like, okay, well, we can starve them out until we get here because that's all a tax write-off. Then we'll talk about moving forward. In the meantime, you have people that are really scared. So your listeners know this because of their interest in listening to this podcast, but of course it doesn't affect just the obvious people. It affects everyone down the chain. Yeah. But yes, it's a very strange time showing up right now representing my feature film Maestra. I'm talking to you as a documentary filmmaker, and it's a very strange time to be talking about the strike in my current position. I'm not talking as a union member. I'm talking about this part of my creative life, which is the main part of my creative life where I don't have representation.
It's interesting. We interviewed Jeff Clanagan of Heartbeat Entertainment, Kevin Hart's company. He's the president of that company. And we interviewed him, I think, 1 week before the strike, back a little bit before May. And his take on it then was, we'll just pivot to reality. Now, he's an executive, right? We'll just pivot. And I would love to talk to him again and see, to your point, did that play out like he expected? And is that playing out as he expected? Because I think that pivot is probably going to end up being harder than anticipated, to your point. And what you said about non-representation makes so much sense to me, because in the Producers Guild, we have a Slack channel where we all kind of get together and have community. And almost every message is about documentary filmmaking. And now that makes so much sense to me, because you don't have representation. You're not part of a union. You don't have anybody negotiating on your behalf. So you really have to lean back on your fellow documentary producers for every element of the production phase and process. And I think you should join the Producers Guild for that reason, just because you will find community around documentary filmmaking in particular, because basically every PGA member that isn't making a giant movie like Oppenheimer or Barbie is making a documentary film there.
Well, we have I'm a member of the Documentary Producers Alliance. So I don't know too much about the PGA, but it's not like the DGA or WGA or SAG-AFTRA.
No, it's not.
It's not like you're a member and then you
get health insurance,
your health insurance, and your pension.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. They're working on it, but it's not the case right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So we definitely have a long way to go, especially since documentary has, in the last 10 years, right? Is that about right? Yeah. No, more. When was the last strike? 2007?
2008, 7, 8. Yeah, 7 and 8.
Yeah.
They almost always align with financial crises, by the way.
Interesting.
I think the only one that didn't was the one in 1960. But all the other ones were around. So the one in 88 was right after Black Monday. All the strikes that have happened when there's been an economic downturn. So basically these corporations start to tighten their belts and get really nervous and scared, get anxiety about the state of either the country or the economy. And then the taxpayers for that end up being the labor force.
Right.
Then the labor force is like, what the heck? And then because they're represented by a union, they're like, okay, let's strike. And it happens, every time. So that's kind of where it's at. So you are allowed to, but not being represented, you are allowed to talk about, and that's, I guess, the good news here is like you are allowed to talk about your documentary. You are allowed to talk about, Maestra, without feeling like you are, scabbing at all or doing anything you shouldn't be doing, which I think is great, right? Yeah.
So it's a very interesting time to try and, well, first of all, going back to where actually, let's help me get back into
it. No, that's it. I mean, like I'm glad you can talk about it because,
with the strike, you're right.
Yeah. But here's the thing, you were saying it trickles down to everybody. Well, It trickles down to us. Who do we bring on as guests if they can't talk about their stuff?
Oh my gosh, that's so weird.
Promote anything. So we're affected by it. The longest strike in history was 22 weeks, and we're going to get close to that here. And so
that's so interesting.
Like we didn't, at the time, we didn't think it was going to affect us at all. And we're finding, okay, the only people that can talk on the record, and feel completely comfortable are documentary filmmakers and people in reality, or people who are working behind the scenes outside of that promo space. And now there are even mandates and rules for podcasters. Our friend and colleague and friend of the podcast, AJ Furman, who does PR, just laid down a bunch of rules for podcasters. And I'm like, I don't even know what the rules are. Like, what am I allowed to do, say, who am I allowed to bring on? So I think it's an interesting topic, and you're right, it does trickle down, but I am glad we're able to talk about your doc. I grew up, by the way, sitting on my dad's lap. He would let me stay up late from time to time, and I would sit beside him or sit on his lap and watch David Letterman in the early 80s. And that's the kind of comedy, the type of monologue, type of tone and pace I grew up used to, and understanding why that was funny. And here he is as an executive producer of this documentary. So I'm just curious, you were talking about the funding coming in bits. Was David always there from the beginning, or did he come in sort of in the back end, help you with finishing funds? How did he become like the lead EP on this thing?
So my producer, Neil Berkeley, was working with Worldwide Pants on developing some other projects. And so Worldwide Pants was the first place we took Maestra to, and they were the first supporters in.
Oh, wow.
So that was, they were the first money in.
That's amazing.
But then I do have to say, immediately following that was Jamie Wolf and Foothill Entertainment, who came in and matched that. And that's what helped start our journey. And then, which was, the beginning money is the most important part.
Agreed.
So it's what gets you jump started. And so we got our jump start, and then we were off to the races from there. But it was not easy. It was a slog. Like every single step was a slog. One would think that this was a sort of slam dunk topic. Conductors were in the zeitgeist, oddly enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were just out of sort of the Me Too. Me Too was very much in our culture. So talking about women's issues, which this film is about as well. Mm-hmm. And then you have music. So you've got music, you've got women, and you've got a competition. It's a competition. People love competition documentaries. So we thought it was a slam dunk, and we would go to various production companies looking for financing. And oftentimes I would be told, it's great, but you're a first time director. I'm not sure about, a little uneasy on that. I mean, they would never say that outright, but we did get to me, but we would get a first time director pass, or we're not too sure classical music is really for our audience. And it's just like proving this wrong time and time again. And here we are with a fully fleshed out film.
So you would think, and look, I've been an EP on several films and an investor in a variety of markets, frankly. And when the first money in is David Letterman and Worldwide Pants, greatest production name ever, by the way, you would think that everyone would be clamoring to invest in the film. But I can just tell you from other investing circles that there is a bit of sort of an inside baseball hatred, not hatred, that's the wrong word, but there's a trepidation in film investment. And smart investors, quote unquote, to be in the club of being considered a smart investor, you shouldn't say that you invested in a film. And so I think, did you get a sense of that where there were just investors that were like, gosh, I want to try to invest in something that will 100x versus
David Letterman was the first. David Letterman was the first financier that trusted the film, trusted me telling this story, and he is in a point where he wants to make content that is good for the world, and he happens to be a classical music fan. So those two things came together. He
perfect
saw
investor. Yep.
Well, a random investor. If we're talking about a film about female empowerment and women in positions that are usually historically the podiums have white men that come from a sense of privilege, it is very interesting that we do have our first financier in being a white man of privilege. And to his credit, he basically our whole film, our film is an ecosystem of what society should be if we don't want to be having to make movies about women breaking glass ceilings anymore. Like, I don't want to have to make those movies. We have to make those movies. I don't want to speak for the whole half of the population, but I don't want to have to make those movies. I want to tell stories of interesting people who happen to be women, not because they're women, their stories need to be told. So this film was not made possible because of big female-led production companies in Hollywood who talk about the need to support women filmmakers telling female stories. That's not how this film was made. This film was made by the first money in of a privileged white man in power and a production company owned by Neil Berkeley, who is also a man who is all like, yet it was, here is an opportunity. Here is the support. Here's the autonomy. Do your thing. And that here's the support and here's your autonomy is critical to be able to have the vulnerability, the sensitivity, I think that you've experienced watching the film. And that needs to happen time and time again. And in addition, there's a whole army of women who also supported this film. As I said, well, Dave was the first money in. It was matched by Jamie Wolf, who's been an EP on a lot of my favorite documentaries.
Was it easy to get those funds because David was first in? I guess is the question.
No, not at all. No.
And was your expectation that it'd be easier? Because I hear you saying it wasn't, but did you think, damn, we landed David Letterman, so now everybody's going to want to invest?
Of course. When that deal was signed, my thought was the film's financed. Because everyone's going to come running, right? Because all the phones are going to be answered, right? All the doors are going to open, right? Like, of course I thought that. And it was the exact opposite. It was, I think about the financing for Maestra as a golden carrot on a stick. It was like always there because it was always like, it's going to happen. People are so excited about it. And it was I knew it was going to be good. I don't always feel that way about projects that turn out to be really great. This one I was confident it was going to be good. And I was confident it was going to be made one way or another. And the financing was always, yes, but can you do this first? Yes, but can you give us a profile on this person? Yes, but can you please assemble this? Like we need a little bit more and then we'll feel comfortable saying yes. So it was always chasing something that was just out of reach until it wasn't out of reach. And we didn't have financing to crew up and film the main event, which was in Paris, which required more than, but we did it with 3 camera crews backstage. I could have done with a 4th, but couldn't, with budget. So a 16-person crew, mostly French speaking, we had to do that in under a month. We had to crew that up in under a month. No one on our team had produced an international shoot before, much less one of this size. So it was an incredible team effort to get this done. But it was always, we just knew it was going to be good.
I love when you have those feelings because I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like it's undescribable, like our indescribable. Like you, I don't know how to put it into words. Why you get those feelings, but you just know. Like when you just know, it's almost like a basketball player with a hot hand. You just like you don't know what you're feeling, but you know if you shoot, you're going to score. And you scored with this. It was great. I don't know if you're able to say, but can you give us like a ballpark of what a budget would be like, or what your budget was like for this film? And did you strike it accurately at first, or did you have to go up after you started shooting?
I can tell you it should have been 1.2, and I can tell you it was not.
Okay, got it.
I can tell you that I own a camera package that I didn't know how to use before this film because I had to learn.
Okay, so you directed and DP'd this?
I was one of many camera operators. I was definitely not. It's much too beautiful to say that I was the DP on it, but I was one of many camera operators. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how do notes work? This is just for me, honestly. Maybe the audience likes this or not, but how does it work as the director when you're getting notes on a documentary versus traditional notes that you would have gotten on a feature film?
So documentaries come together in the edit. A documentary is essentially written in the edit. You go out with you have to have a structure in mind. You have to have an intention. And then because it's a living, breathing creature, the documentary tells you what it also needs to be. And a lot of the times that communication with this creature is happening in the edit. It's happening in the field as you're watching things unfold. You're watching things that you thought were going to happen, not happen, or surprised by things that you never knew would be parts of this film or themes of this film. But it's in the edit where you realize, oh, well, in my narrative journey here in this arc, this chunk that is my absolute favorite thing has to go away. It just has to. It starts to make itself obvious. It's not like a script where you know what works and doesn't work before you film it.
Right.
The notes are essential. It's essential to get people to watch a film in its rough cut and along the way. And then you have to figure out what works and doesn't work for the film yourself. So some of my absolute favorite parts of this film, I was told to cut in note sessions. Ooh. And it made sense logically why that note was given, but it was a feeling thing. Like, I like this. Yeah. And it just had to get to a point where it was because it was my first time directing, not first time producing, first time directing, I had to start to be okay with saying, I'm just going to keep it in. Why? Because I like it. Yeah. And if I like it, someone else is going to like it. Turns out most people like it. And now sharing a cinema space with an audience and having people laugh when you were laughing and crying when you were crying and showing you different colors that you didn't even really know that would come out. It's an incredible experience. There's this great meme going around. It's a pizza and it's a picture of a pizza, and part of it is M&Ms. Part of it is like a giant, like roast chicken. Part of it's pepperoni. And it's like, this is what it looks like when you get notes from and take notes from everybody. Like, yeah. Right. It's this gross thing. So it's up to the director, obviously, to pick and choose what they feel works for the film. And it's also really important to really, really hear people's notes and try them and experiment with them to a degree. For this film, it was when I started getting contradictory notes that got really difficult. You would have one person saying they loved it and the exact same moment saying that does not belong in this film. And what do you do when you're getting contradictory notes from your core team? It was not easy.
It's almost like your vision is the dough in that pizza analogy. It's like the notes are the toppings, the stuff you see, and it's shrouding your original vision for the project. And you got to figure out how to get back to the foundational thing so you don't lose your interest in the project itself and become somebody else's vision. It's such a tough thing. So here we are. You did a great documentary. You made a great documentary. Everybody should watch it. Can you just talk about what's next for the doc? Like, what's your distribution plan? How do you plan on ROI in this thing? And when can we get to see it?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too. So it just premiered at Tribeca Film Festival in competition, which was incredible. We won an audience award, which was incredible.
Congrats.
We then went on and had our international premiere in England, the Sheffield Documentary Fest, which was another incredible opportunity for the film. And it played DC And now our next is this Saturday. We're at Cape Cod at Woods Hole Film Festival. Really proud to be playing Sidewalk Film Fest in Birmingham, Alabama, and we're in competition there. That is one of the most respected indie film fests in the States. And so we're really excited about that. And yeah, we've got invitations from film festivals all over the world. We have concert halls all over the world saying we want to screen this film for audiences and have a talk back. So there's this appetite. Music schools are asking for it. People want to see this film. The industry is on ice right now. Trying to sell a film in this environment is basically makes sense. The film was incredibly hard to make. It's still incredibly hard to find distribution for it. I don't want to be, whether this sounds haughty or not, I firmly believe, having been in this industry for a while now, that if this was 3 years ago, if this was pre-pandemic, this film would have been snapped up very quickly and for the right amount of money. But right now, everyone is not knowing exactly what it is they even can do. So we are still looking for distribution. Right now, my phone is just blowing up with, well, here's updates, here's this, what do we do? It's all strategy. We can't do anything right now. Are effusive about this film and are like, it's going to find its right home. So I'm just holding on to that.
Well, people have to understand, I'm not buttering your ass here. This is a really good documentary. I'm not just saying it because you're a guest on the podcast. You're a guest on the podcast because the documentary is awesome. And I think people think that I have to be nice to you. I don't have to be nice to you. I don't have to be saying these nice things. I really liked it. It's really good. It's really going to make it. It's really going to do great things out in the world. I would love to see it screen at there's a palace in Vienna called the Schönbrunn. I think that's how you pronounce it. Producer Papa Bear, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's called the Schönbrunn Palace, and they have an orchestra that plays inside of the palace every day. And how incredible would it be to screen it at this place that probably gets, 100,000 people walk through it a day. So check that out if you want to. It's that would be incredible. And then also, I'm going to talk my own book here, so please, deal with me, tolerate me for a couple of minutes. Please consider submitting it to the Nashville Film Festival. People don't know this, but Nashville is the second largest city for scoring in film. We have one of the best grant programs for if you spend $50,000 on your score, we give you 37.5% back. It's insane. And then you're getting, and this is the thing that people underrate, you're not getting a bunch of people who make beats. You're getting the world's best musicians when you come to Nashville. You're getting the world's best session musicians. So your music's going to be through the roof great. And I think that's why it's been so popular. But hey, bring the music film to the Music City. Consider it. Obviously it's a team effort, but I would love to see it submitted there.
I have a huge soft spot for Nashville. I've spent a lot of time there. I absolutely love it. At one point, I thought I'd be one of the thousands of Californians moving there. I do
there's so
love
many.
it.
Yeah. The next time you come, hit me up. I'll give you a key to the city.
Excellent. I'll keep that. I will.
Yeah, keep it in mind, and then I can introduce you to the film festival people here and the indie film community here. I think they'd be honored to meet you and learn from you if they don't do it through this podcast. Papa Bear, why don't you come back on and repeat this question for the audience?
Okay.
And we'll I've already given you my answer. My answer, like I said, is and you don't know this about me, Maggie, but I'm mostly French-German or German-French, however we would say that. And then I'm 40% sub-Saharan African. So my mom was black and my dad's white, obviously. But the, French-German. So I'm not saying anything wrong by saying that my cousin, Olga Kleiner Schmidt, is the first female conductor. So that's my answer. But we'll repeat the question, Papa Bear, and then let Maggie give her best shot at this, assuming she did not Google.
That's what that 1 minute was for.
Yeah.
Who was the first woman to ever direct major orchestras?
So in the film, we have Clara Schumann, who's one of the first female composers. I don't know if she ever conducted. There was Brika who comes to mind. I forget where she's from. Yes, those are my two best shots.
Okay.
Antonia, maybe? Antonia.
Okay, so here's the answer I have. Famed French composer and teacher Nadia Boulanger. She lived from 1887 to 1979, was likely the first woman to ever direct major orchestras, including the Boston Symphony, New York Philharmonic, and the BBC Symphony, giving world premieres of works by both Stravinsky and Copland in the late 1930s.
Thank you, Papa Bear.
You're welcome.
Producer Papa Bear, that is an awesome thing we should know. Say the name one more time. What's her name?
Nadia Boulanger.
Nadia.
It's Boulanger.
Well, I think Maggie has her next documentary. We need a documentary on Nadia Boulanger, obviously. Like, how could we not have one? How the world needs to know this woman's name.
Well,
you know?
I'll tell you what. Wikipedia knows it.
Well said. And thank you for another amazing thing we should know, Papa Bear.
You're welcome.
No, take care. That's beautiful. So, Maggie, are you surprised? Had you heard this name before? Let me just ask you that.
I have. Yes, it does ring a bell.
Okay. Is she worth doing a documentary? I shouldn't put it that way, but is her life, is it interesting? Does it what do you know about this woman?
What Papa Bear said.
Just all right. So we have some Googling to do when we get off this conversation, when this podcast ends. And I think this is a great place to get some of that information and bring this thing to a close. It's been a ride. It's been so much fun. I can't thank you and Charity enough for dropping in and sharing your knowledge. And I want to have you guys back as many times as you want to come back, and maybe even you guys individually for one of our sort of classic conversations where we get into sort of an audio resume of your entire life, which is always a good time and totally evergreen. But until then, can you tell us where we can find you on social media, on the internet, see some of your other work even, and how we can look out and support Maestra?
Thank you. Maestra is on Instagram at Maestra Movie. Well, there is no dot. At Maestra Movie, Maestra Movie. I am at my name, Maggie Contreras, 2 R's, Contreras. And that's the same for my website. It's just myname.com. I think you can stream the Gilbert Gottfried documentary now. You can stream Jonathan Scott's Power Trip now. And Maestra will be coming to a city near you soon at a film festival, and hopefully very soon on your screen of choice at home. But follow our account too. If you're really interested in knowing what the film's doing, all of our updates will be on our Instagram account, and things are in development right now.
I love it. And please keep us posted on the developments. We're obviously following all those accounts on Instagram already. And I'm looking forward to seeing this thing blow up and succeed in the world. So thank you so much for your time. And for those who don't know already, you can follow and listen and subscribe to the Make It podcast on 35 different places across the interwebs. But we would love for your subscription on YouTube. We just started this YouTube page this year. We're so proud of it. It looks great. And I think we already have something along the lines of like 140 or 150 videos up. So by the time this publishes, it'll probably be probably be a lot more than that. So please subscribe, support that. And, but of course you can find this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can learn more about the Make It podcast and what we do as an organization at Bonsai Creative at www.bonsai.film. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on X, formerly called Twitter, at Flame in Your Heart. That's UR, so it's spelled UR, so Flame in UR Heart. Or you can just search for Chris Barkley and I will come right up. If you want to reach out to the absentee Nicholas Buggs, you can find Nick and reach out to him and tell him how disappointed you are in him for not making this Indie Talk at nick@bonsai.film. Yes, that's an email address. He is a bold man. Reach out to him, send him a line via email. And then last but not least, we do this incredible bi-weekly newsletter. It is some of the most hard to find and interesting things happening in film. We do not just aggregate a bunch of headlines from Variety and Hollywood Reporter and throw them in our newsletter and say, here, eat this. That's not what we do. That would be no value to you. We find the things that are hidden under the rocks, the gems, the needles in the haystack, and then we put them together and give them to you along with some POV of our own in commentary. So you can subscribe to that at www.bonsai.film/subscribe, and you will not regret it. So with that, Maggie, I appreciate you so much. We'll talk again soon. And instead of Nick, I will leave us with the credo: be better, be creative, be engaged, and we'll talk to you next time on the Make It podcast. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you, Chris.
Of course. Be good.